Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you.
So this is the last Sunday that I'll be talking about Shortcut to a Miracle. And I want to just remind you that we defined miracles according to Rand and Eric. A miracle is a series of natural events occurring in the right sequence and at the right time to produce wonderful results. And I want to just remind us of the probability of our being in this world at this time. The numbers of it are 1 to the 10th power, no, 1 in 10, there we go, 1 in 10 to the 2,600,000 power. I know. I can't even say it right, much less imagine and fathom it. I don't think there's enough ink in this world to print the zeros that are necessary to follow all of that. Now, to put it in context, there are approximately, in the whole entire universe, 10 to the 80th power atoms. 10 to the 80th power atoms compared to 1 in 10 to the 2,600,000 chances of you being here.
Wow.
I know. Hallelujah. Let's have a hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah.
Can I get an amen?
Amen. Absolutely. Now that's a miracle. It's a miracle that you're sitting here today in all sorts of ways. Hallelujah. So I want to just share a miracle that I discovered on in the Mysterious Ways magazine, and it was written by Diane Aiden, and she talks about her uncle Jack Aiden, who was an immigrant from Turkey, and her uncle and her father had immigrated from Turkey, and they were sons of ministers. And her uncle Jack was going to school to get a degree in business, and he was working very hard. This was in Parmas, New Jersey. So he was working in a paper factory and going to school, taking classes in finance. And one night, he was leaving the paper factory after having been to class and then having worked and worked. And it was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And the weather was horrible. So Jack was driving through Parmas, New Jersey, in a snowstorm, and then it began to hail. And he could barely see. And he kept driving and driving, and he was tired, and he was discouraged. And then his car slid off of the highway and was headed toward a rather expensive home just a few feet from the highway. And he just was terrified. And then suddenly the car stopped because it had mowed across this grass and into some bushes, torn up the grass, torn up the bushes, and ended up just feet away from the house, a rather expensive house. And he got out to look, and he thought, oh man, wow. And it was in the middle of the night. It was dark, and the home was dark. And he thought, I could just leave and nobody would know how I had torn up the grass and torn up the bushes and the trees. And then his father's voice came to him, and his father's voice said, well, you never can hide from God. So he got himself a little piece of paper, and he wrote his name, and he wrote his telephone number, and in the middle of the night, in this dark house, he rang the doorbell. And his English wasn't good. And there was darkness, and finally, some guy came to the door in his yammies. And so Jack Aiden told the man he was so sorry that he had this accident, and he had torn up his yard, and he torn up the bushes, and he would pay. Call me, he said, call me, and I'll pay. And then he got back in the car, and he left. And he was terrified because he and his brother had very little money, practically no money at all. They were living on candy bars. And he waited for that phone call. Because he knew it'd be years and years before he could restore the damage to the trees and the grass. But the phone call didn't ever come. It didn't ever come. So 3 years later, he had just completed his master's degree, or was on the verge of it. He hadn't actually completed it, but he was on the verge of it. And he was out looking for a job. And he thought, oh, who's going to hire me? I don't really have any experience except working in a paper factory. And I can't speak English very well. Who's going to hire someone who can't speak, who has no real education credentials, has no work experience? But there was a finance place not too far from the college that he went to, and so he borrowed a suit that was too big for him. And he went to the interview, and he could tell that the man interviewing him was a nice man, but not too interested in him. Not too interested that his suit didn't fit. Not too interested that he couldn't speak English. Not too interested that he hadn't finished his degree. And the man very politely looked at his handwritten resume, and he said, wait, is your name Jack A? Yes, it is. And the man got up, left the room, and he came back with this piece of paper. Is this you? Did you leave this note that you had run into the trees in my house? Jack said, oh my God. After all of this time, yes, sir, that's me. And I'll pay. I'll pay. You never did call. I told you I would pay. And the man said, I've never seen anybody so scared as you were that night. He said, have the courage to ring the doorbell in the middle of the night when you could have just driven away. I'll pay, I'm so sorry. You have the child. Because, he said, anyone with that kind of integrity to have the courage in the middle of the night is the kind of man we want. I don't know. I think that's a miracle. And I think that the seeds of the miracle had been planted a long time before. And it took time for that miracle to come to fruition. And that's how miracles can happen. They can take a long time to sprout and grow, or they can be like lettuce seeds and sprout and grow overnight. Eckhart Tolle says this: through allowing your way, you allow the vast spaciousness of your whole being. You are not a fragment anymore, which is how the ego perceives itself. Your true nature emerges, which is one with the nature of God. So today we're talking about allowing the miracle. And that is about trusting the universe to create the circumstances and the situations that work for you. It's about allowing. So I say often that it should be easy. And when I say that, there seems to be like a sense of objection. I mean, here we have a whole country full of people that are celebrating labor tomorrow. Like, that's what we need to do. We need to labor. We need to work hard. We need to buckle up and buckle down and do our fair share. And no. We're God. We are God in action. It should be easy for us. All we need to do is ask. And the whole universe conspires to flow to you all that you long for, all that you desire. Because don't forget, you yourself, the very fact that you're existing is a miracle. And the universe is supporting its own creation, its own miracle. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to labor. All you need to do is ask. There's another story I want to share with you. It's from that same magazine, Mysterious Wave magazine. Just the name I love. So this man had applied for a job, another job, within his own company. And he didn't feel like he was going to be able to get it because he wasn't young enough and he wasn't educated enough, and all of the reasons of insecurity and doubt and self-doubt and fear that comes up for all of us. And his wife kept saying, just trust. And he'd get himself all stirred up, and she'd say, just trust. So one time, they went to the grocery store, and they came back from the grocery store, and she was expecting a call from the telephone company, and she was all labored down in bags, carrying the bags in, and the telephone rang, and she asked him to answer it, because usually it would go to voicemail, but she asked him to answer it, but he didn't get there in time. And so she said, well, who was it? And he had the phone with a caller ID, and the caller ID said, fervent prayer. Who called? Fervent prayer. So she called the phone company back, and yes, they said they had called, but they couldn't imagine why the caller ID would come up and say, fervent prayer. So she said to her husband, maybe this is a message from the universe for you to pray fervently about that job. And so they did. And so he got it. But You know, what is that? When the caller ID says fervent prayer? Wow. I think that's a good reminder for all of us, isn't it? Every time the phone rings, just imagine your caller ID says fervent prayer. And if you were to do that, life would flow so easily for you. Because really, that's the miracle starter. The key, the starter key to miracles is just fervent prayer. Asking, and you shall receive. Because we know that what you think is what you get. And the whole universe conspires to support you because you are a miracle. All you need to do is ask. There's no struggle in that. There's no labor in it. All you have to do is say yes to the universe. Yes. Thank you for the support. Yes, I am a miracle. Yes. So when we talk about allowing, it is because we deserve to be loved and pampered and coddled by the universe. How many of you allow yourself to go to a massage therapist and get a massage, right? And when you do that, you're allowing yourself to be loved and supported and coddled. Now that's just a minuscule amount of care that's available in this world. Just imagine allowing yourself to accept that same sort of nurturing, love, and support from the entire universe. Just saying yes to receiving all of that is good. All of that the universe has to give. It is yours by divine right because you are a miracle. And the odds of you potentially showing up in this world are what? 1 to the 10th power to 6 million or whatever. You're no accident. And the universe loves you and supports you. And all you have to do is say yes. You don't have to struggle. You don't have to labor. You don't have to work so hard at it. In fact, when you work so hard at it, what you're saying to the universe is, it's hard. And the universe says, okie dokie, here it is hard. You want hard? I'll give it to you. We're enculturated that way. We're enculturated to think that we have to struggle. We're enculturated to think that we're noble if we suffer. We're enculturated to think that life is hard, that it's difficult. And the truth of the matter is, that's just what we make up. The truth of the matter is the whole universe conspires to give you all of the good that you're willing to accept, that you're willing to say yes to. Osho says this: get deeper and deeper into yes. Say yes to each and everything. Say yes to good and bad, to day and night, to summer and winter. Say yes to success and failure. Say yes to life and to death. Forget everything else. Just remember one word. Yes. And it can transform your whole being. It can become a revolutionary change. It's radical. Yes is radical. You deserve a miracle. You are a miracle. All you have to do is say yes. I love you all.